Hey guys, and welcome to Film Artsy, your #1 source for all things films and movies. And while over the years it seems like there's been a huge debate when it comes to the comic book movies, whether it's Marvel with their cinematic universe or DC with their DC extended universe, there's definitely been a comparison and a rivalry for years. And it's really interesting because when the DCEU started off, it seemed like the real intention was to rival the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Hence the reason we saw so many crossover films kind of shoehorned really early on. However, now we're starting to see a change of pace for the DCEU, and Zack Snyder, who's in charge of the recut of course, Justice League that fans have been looking forward to for years, kind of chimed in on the comparison and the competition almost between the DCEU and Marvel, which is something he's talked about for years, just in various interviews, but he kind of reiterated and talked about some new things recently in an interview that's extremely interesting to see. Now, Snyder went on in an interview talking a little bit about how he likes that when we see things in the DCEU, especially more recently, where it seems like the directors have the ability to embrace their own storytelling and personality. He said in an interview, well, frankly, I just love that they decided to kind of embrace their personality. I think that there was always this sort of criticism and or the middle step. What's the middle step? You know, trying to be like Marvel, trying to do your own thing. Like, what are you going to do? But I think now it's kind of locked into this very specific trajectory where I think, and I hope, the idea is the filmmaker first, which is basically what the multiverse allows for. Filmmaker first, and then here's the characters, bringing those characters together. Now this is really interesting just because it is a pretty big tonal shift from what we saw in the beginning with the DCEU, especially with where right away we saw a lot of characters being introduced in crossovers, them quickly doing a Batman v Superman, throwing Wonder Woman in there, really trying to build up to the Justice League rather quickly, where Marvel kind of did it a little bit differently, where they introduced one character at a time over the course of multiple years before culminating multiple stories into one big crossover event. So it is interesting because that was one of the biggest criticisms that the DCEU has had. But in this interview, it's really interesting because Snyder actually looks into some of the things that the DCEU has done right compared to Marvel that may actually give DC the edge when you're comparing the Marvel Cinematic Universe to the DCEU. In the interview, he goes on to talk a little bit about how with the DCEU, essentially there were a lot of different facets to DC that existed. There was the animated films, there was the CW shows, and a lot of these had their own built-in fan bases, on top of the fact that they were coming right in on the heels of other things like the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, which were in their own right extremely popular, and to kind of retcon those and start fresh like how Marvel did, having a lot of time to build up and connect everything together, just wasn't really an approach or an option for DC. So instead, them now and going into the future, embracing all facets of DC content over all of the years, rather than picking one specific starting point with, say, Man of Steel, it is interesting to see that there's a more diverse approach, and this could mean more universes crossing over in the future, which ties a lot into a lot of the little things that have been rumored and speculated for quite some time, that DC is planning on kind of just leaving the doors open for anyone and anything to cross over into their cinematic universe that have ever necessarily existed. We saw a sneak peek of that in the post-credit scene of Wonder Woman 1984 with, spoiler alert, where we saw the actress who played Wonder Woman in the 70s make a small appearance, and we're expecting to see much more of that into the future, which could be really cool, just leaving everything on the table as possibilities. But what do you guys think of the DCEU versus the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Which do you prefer? Which do you think has the most potential going forward? And which do you think will maybe win in the next couple of years? Let us know what you're thinking in the comments down below. Be sure to subscribe with notifications on for more videos like this uploaded every single day of the week. That's it for today. We'll see you all next time with a brand new video.
Talking?
I'm about to.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, everybody. How you doing?
Hi.
Hi. See you guys.
Know anybody?